I guess for me, the key message in doing this podcast and as we continue forward in the podcast is that this isn't about blaming or shaming, and it's about what we do with our pain and how we choose to grow from our pain. Learn one simple thing from just this episode, and hopefully you'll learn more as we continue through the episodes that we have for this podcast, is that it's okay for things to get dark. This show really is about healing, parenting, and rebuilding, because we all need to rebuild and we all need to heal. And if you're a parent, parenting is hard. Hi, and welcome to our first episode of Doing It Scared, the Brave Rebuild. Today, we'll talk a little bit about my story. I have titled this episode From Betrayal to Breakthrough, because today I want to talk a little bit about myself and what has led me to do this podcast and why I definitely believe in doing things scared. My name is Evis. I'm a licensed therapist, a mom, and a realtor. And a few years ago, my life turned upside down when my marriage ended after betrayal. Today, my ex is with a woman that he had the affair with, and they're starting a family together. And as crazy as it may sound, we now have a really strong co-parenting relationship. But it took time before we got there. So today I want to take you back a bit to, and anyone that's been through any sort of betrayal, loss, you remember exact dates and times of when you first found something out. So for me, that was on March 13th of 2023. And it was late. It was probably like 11 o'clock at night. And that's the day that I found out that my ex-husband, then husband, was having an affair. The nitty-gritty of it, I think, like most people find out, you see a message, you see something that sparks this internal gut feeling where you're like, maybe I need to dig deeper. For me, that internal gut feeling came from my ex and I had a fight. We typically would resolve within 24 hours. We'd at least have some sort of conversation about it. But this time around, we didn't. And I remember telling my sister about the fight and saying, hey, like, I don't know what's happening. We haven't spoken for like 2 days. And she put a little message. She's like, maybe he's cheating on you. And I remember thinking, no, no way. He would never do that. Well, lo and behold, later that night, I got in my head, he was sleeping. I'm like, I need to figure out if he's cheating on me or not. And I did. And I found the messages, I found the photos of him and his affair partner at the time. And honestly, my world shattered. The moment I found out, I went upstairs. He was sleeping. I woke him up. And it took a little bit of convincing, but he finally was honest with me. And honestly, I think if you've ever felt a free fall, if you've ever gone skydiving, I think that's the feeling I was having. I remember standing in our bedroom. It's as if the ground beneath me opened up and I was just falling. And, you know, that's a very normal reaction. It's a very normal reaction for some people. You can either enter something like fight or flight or freeze. So for some people, if you've experienced a loss of sorts, you may enter a freeze where you don't react at all. Or you may enter the fight where you're ready to either start throwing some punches or you get angry and upset. Or you enter flight where you just escape. And for me, I entered this state of disbelief and I had to ask several times, like, if this was actually real. I asked a lot of questions that in retrospect, and I wish I hadn't, in the sense that I wish I hadn't been like, but what about your family? Don't you love us? And things of that nature. But the thing is what I've learned in the last 2 years with those going back and reliving and rethinking some of those moments is that it's okay. It is okay to have asked those questions at the time. It did not mean that that's what I was going to, that I was begging. It did not mean any of that. It's your body's trying to process and your brain is trying to process information that feels so foreign, that it's something that you thought would never happen. I had full trust in my ex-husband. And when I say full trust, I mean I never in a million years thought that this would be the outcome of our marriage. We also had two little ones at the time. My youngest he wasn't even 2 yet. My daughter had just turned 3. And so it was a lot, and it was unexpected, and it was hard. And honestly, it's taken 2.5 years to get to a place where I feel peace, to get to a place where, I don't feel any shame. I don't place any blame. Obviously, my ex-husband did something awful, and he's the one that has to carry that blame and shame. But for a long time there, I carried a lot of shame and a lot of blame in what happened. And I'm finally in a place where it's okay. It wasn't me. Obviously, I think in any relationship, and everyone can do things better, but this isn't my burden to carry. I'm in a place where, like I said, I co-parent really well with my ex-husband, and he's with the affair partner still. They had a kind of on and off, but they're together and they're growing their family. My children are going to have another little sister. And I've accepted all of that. And it takes time to get there. And it takes a lot of grief and a lot of pain in order to get there. And, I guess for me, the key message in doing this podcast, and as we continue forward in the podcast, is that this isn't about blaming or shaming, and it's about what we do with our pain and how we choose to grow from our pain. And it can feel really hard if you're experiencing or you're going through the difficult situation, whether it's a loss of a marriage, a loss to death, or anything of that nature. It can feel very difficult to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I can tell you that there were many a times, I think the first at least 6 months after the affair came out. I mean, I had two children, so, and I was working as a full-time realtor at the time, so I still had to go to showings, and I still had to get up in the mornings, and I had to take my children to school, and I had to feed them, and I had to try and protect them from my emotions, because it was not their responsibility to carry my emotions. But those days were dark, and those days were hard. And, I have vivid memory. I think if you can learn one simple thing from just this episode, and hopefully you'll learn more as we continue through the episodes that we have for this podcast, is that it's okay for things to get dark. I remember, I think, core memories of all of this were I would get up in the morning and take my children to school. And then I would come back, and I had, my work desk in my office at the time. And I would just lay underneath the desk because it was closed, and I felt protected laying in this space that was almost enclosed. And I'd lay underneath the desk and with the carpet, and I would cry. Like, I think I would cry for hours. I mean, it was my body was grieving, and my body had to release all these emotions. My head was spiraling, the rumination, the thoughts of, I am so, the thoughts of, like, how am I going to do this? Like, I'm going to be a single mother with two children under 3. How am I going to do this? And I was so scared. I think that's the hardest emotion, is you're just so scared, and you just live in this fear, and your brain holds you captive there a little bit. And I remember, and I hope you guys can use this tool too. And honestly, I've called it the art of swearing, because it's what I used during my darkest time. And I would sit there and I would set an alarm. Let's say I had a meeting with a client at 11, or, I had to go pick up the kids, or I had to get up and try to make something for lunch or for dinner. And I would sit there and I would be like, as I'm crying, and I realize I've been crying probably for the past 2 hours, and I'd be like, you are Elvis motherfucking Mason. You are going to get up off this fucking ground, and you are going to go and you're going to pick your kids up. If there's anything you're doing today, you're going to go and do that. Or you're Elvis motherfucking Mason. You are going to get up off this ground, and you are going to go and meet with that client to sell their house, because you need to freaking do this. Get up and fucking do it. And I call it the art of swearing, because the swearing piece, and I swear occasionally, but saying that gave me a power that, and a confidence that I'm like, yes, I can do this. Yes, I'm Evis motherfucking Mason. I can do this. I can get up. I can go do, the pickup. And because honestly, anyone's experienced grief or loss of any sort is something even as simple as just getting in your car to go get your kids from daycare can feel like an impossible task. And so I say that because I encourage you today that if you are in a dark spot and you're having a hard time just getting up even off the bed, try that. Try giving yourself that extra confidence. And the art of swearing has been proven by studies. I know that there was a study in 2022 by Richard Stevens where he found that repeating like a swear word ahead of doing, a physical tasking activity, sort of like working out, it actually increased participants' self-confidence. So the mechanism that he proposed was called this state disinhibition, i.e. lowering inhibition, so basically letting go. And in his research study, proved that people push past unusual fears or concerns when they swear. Again, it has to be, and I'm not talking about swearing like, oh, he's a POS, not that kind, but swear, like giving yourself to like, I can fucking do this. I can fucking do it, and he's also had other studies where he's shown that, swearing significantly increases both pain tolerance and heart rate, which, as you know, sometimes what you need in those moments, especially if you're in that deep depression, is you need to get up and you need your heart rate to increase. So, like I said, like every morning, in moments where it was, during that time, it was really hard to face the mirror. And I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. If you have, please comment on it. But I had a really hard time looking at myself in the mirror at that time. And I would get up and, and by get up, I mean like my children would be crying and screaming and I'd have to get up to get them ready for the day. And in the 5 seconds that I had in the bathroom, I would just look in the mirror and I'd be like, you're Evis motherfucking Mason. You can do this. You can get up. You can get your kids ready and you can take them to school. So, I hope you utilize this skill. If you do, please let me know. I would love to hear more about how, if this worked for you. And honestly, just a really quick recap, this show really is about healing, parenting, and rebuilding because we all need to rebuild and we all need to heal. And if you're a parent, parenting is hard. So, again, our next week's episode will talk more about how to co-parent with grace, even when it feels impossible, because I think there's some things that I did well in my core parenting and some that I did not. So yeah, I hope you're looking forward to the next episode. And if this resonates with you in any way, please follow the podcast and share it with someone who needs hope today. And again, go out there and give yourself extra boost of confidence to go out and say, I am so in motherfucking so and I'm going to do this thing today. So I hope you follow along on this journey with me, and I look forward to releasing some more episodes and to getting to know a lot of you, if a lot of you come around. One of the wonderful things about going through a healing journey is that you start to find a lot of solace and a lot of encouragement in other people's words. And I wanted to leave this episode off with a poem of that I just love. The book is called I Can't Remember to Forget You, and it's by Sophia J. Ross. And this is one of the poems that has given me a lot of encouragement, and I hope to do the same for you. So it says, you should be proud of yourself for how you have faced this recent period, from the silent battles you fought to the moments when you fell, but still chose to rise again and look forward. You are a warrior. So do yourself a favor, celebrate your strength. So I hope whatever season in life you are right now, you find a strength of yours and you celebrate it. Thank you.